Jessica here with Joyful and Simple Designs. Today we are going to be making this super cute triangle book stand. There's something about the beginning of the year that makes me want to read more, so here's a cute way to store your book when you're not reading, to hold your page, and there's only 3 pieces of wood. So for this project I'm going to use the miter saw, and I'm also going to use an 8-inch board. You can also use some other saws if you have like a skill saw or a table saw. Those should both cut angles. For the first angle that I'm going to cut, I'm going to do it 22.5, and most saws have stoppers on the angles that are pretty well used, so mine stops right at 22.5. Okay, I'm just gonna start by cutting this first angle off, and then I'll measure my piece. Okay, so as I'm cutting and measuring my pieces, when I give you guys a measurement, it's going to be from the longest point to the longest point. So these angles are gonna come in, and I'm going to be measuring from the longest point of the wood. I'm gonna be cutting my 2 top pieces. So the first angle is going to be 22.5, so that's what I already cut. My second angle is going to be 45 degrees. So I'm gonna change the saw, and my first piece is gonna be 7 inches. So I'm gonna measure out 7 inches. My second piece, I'm going to flip this over because my angles needs to be going in. So my second top piece is going to be 5 7/8. And this one is going to go back to 22.5. So on the top pieces, one angle is going to be 45 and one angle is going to be 22.5. Then on my bottom piece, both angles are going to be 22.5. So I'm flipping it over because I want to measure from long end to long end. And my bottom piece is going to be 6 inches. Okay, so I have my 3 pieces, and I just want to double check that they all fit together pretty nicely. And all wood. It's not perfect, so mine has just a little bit of a bow in it, and if I were to be selling these, I would absolutely get different wood, but for just an in-home project that I'm gonna have, I'm okay with some character. So I think that it looks pretty good. I have quite a few splinters from the saw, but the next step is to sand. My go-to grit for sandpaper is 220. It takes off the splinters, but still gives a pretty nice finish. And if you don't have a sander, you can totally sand by hand. You can absolutely take a piece of sandpaper and just take off those splinters with it. You'll definitely have to put a little bit more muscle into it, but you can do that if that's all you have. Once your pieces are all sanded, I have a little stink bug on my paintbrush. These things are everywhere at my house right now. So once your wood is all sanded, you're going to stain it. So Minimax is my absolutely go-to. I am using English chestnut for this. I have some English chestnut stain pieces in my bedroom, and so this will accent it really well. And I like to use these little chip brushes. I can usually use them a couple times if I'm staining within a day or two, and they're pretty cheap if you get them in bulk. So this is what I like to do. So when I'm staining, I just brush it on. It gets pretty messy, so if you care about your workspace, you're definitely going to want to put like a cardboard underneath or some maybe plastic. And then you are going to want to let these dry for a little bit before you put it all together. Once your pieces are all dry, you are ready to assemble. So I am going to be using a couple different things for this. I have some pretty small trim screws, and I'm just going to use my drill, and I think this is a T10 bit for these. And then for the top, I'm going to use my staple gun. And if you don't have a staple gun, you could use like a nail gun, like a brad nail gun, or you could also just screw you can just use screws too for the top. That's totally fine. I like the staple gun because the staples are just not as noticeable. So that's my preference, but not everyone has a staple gun. And if you are going to screw in from the top, then you could get some wood filler and just fill in those holes. So I have it started, and now I'm just going to use a little pressure to angle that screw so it doesn't pop out of the top piece. So here, let's see if we can. So as I'm screwing, I'm going to angle it to go up into this piece of wood. So this is my bottom. And I'm just going to hold these two pieces to be flush together. And I'm going to flip it over and do the bottom. Do the other side. And I'm just going to hold these two together again. If you are using different screws, if your screws are bigger, then you will need to pre-drill. So I'd grab a small driver or a small drill bit and then pre-drill your holes and then put your bigger screws in. That way your wood doesn't crack. So this first piece is in. I'm going to add this second piece, and I know that my wood isn't perfect, so I am not going to be too concerned that my angles aren't perfect because my wood had a warp in it, and I should have taken more time to pick through the wood, but I didn't, and I'm okay with that. It's just going to be sitting on my nightstand. So I like to do the bottom first because then I can squeeze these angles together when I'm ready if they're a little off. So I just did 2 on each side, and I can always go in and add some more if I feel like it needs some extra support. And if you want to use wood glue, you can. I don't use a lot of wood glue because I don't normally feel like I need it. And so the staples that I'm using, this is for a narrow crown stapler, and these are 1 1/4 inch, and they should go in just fine. So I'm just gonna hold this together so it's lining up well, and I'm gonna staple this in. And because it's going in at a corner or at an angle, I'm gonna have to hammer this in a little bit. If you're using a stapler or a nailer, you're gonna really wanna make sure that your angle is up and down enough so it doesn't pop through this other board. And there you go, you have a book holder. There's only 3 pieces of wood. I think we used probably about a foot. It's definitely under 2 feet. So you could even use scrap wood for this. You had a couple angled cuts, and now you have a spot to put your book.